Today, we're going to go over how I got a free camper. Okay, that's not completely accurate, but hear me out. I don't argue that the cost of RVing has gone up significantly in the past few years, and you can absolutely find plenty of videos on YouTube telling you all about it. But coming into this fairly recently, we found that camping or glamping extremely cost effective. In fact, we've saved so much money over staying in hotels and vacation rentals that it has more than covered the cost of the camper and modifications we've made to it. That's where the free camper comment is coming from. We just got back from a trip over the winter break, and I was calculating the cost of the trip, including the fuel expenses. I had started crunching the numbers, and curiosity got the best of me. So I started pulling other numbers. And since I was falling down the rabbit hole pretty quickly, I decided to take you guys with me. I have a lot of the data as far as the food, tours, rentals, activities, and gas, but I'm not including it. It simply wouldn't be an apples to apples comparison. I don't have an easy way to find past gas prices, and the extras really aren't the point. And we use different vehicles on different trips, so that's not useful either. I'm just doing lodging costs, including taxes and fees. As for the spreadsheets, I'm doing July through December 2024 and July through December 2025. Well, technically, 2025 is through January 4th, 2026, but all the lodging was paid in 2025, and the trip began on December 20th. I knew we had been traveling cheaper this year compared to previous years, but I was shocked at how much it amounted to. I'd already started pulling documents to get the original numbers, but I was convinced I'd gotten something wrong or missed something important. By the end of it, I'd pulled my emails, had my husband find some of his emails, pulled receipts, bank statements, and credit card statements, and was checking it against the family Google Calendar. We planned three big trips during the second half of 2024. All three trips, we booked private homes listed as vacation rentals through various platforms. The summer trip to Blue Ridge, Georgia was booked through Elevate Rentals because they were running a discount that was cheaper than their listings on both Airbnb and VRBO. The North Georgia, Blue Ridge, LJ, Blairsville area is our go to place for a quick trip. So I do usually have better resources for that area than I normally do. I'm also in several rental and tourism Facebook groups, so it's fairly easy to get discounts for that area. The fall break trip in Homosassa has its own entire story, but I'm going to simplify it for the purposes of this video. This place is amazing and normally rents from $600 to $750 a night, depending on the time of the year. I ended up negotiating a small discount with the owner to mitigate the excessive fees VRBO was charging at the time. This was a bucket list trip for me, but ultimately Hurricane Milton had other ideas. The Thanksgiving trip to Blairsville, Georgia was booked directly with the owner because we're both in one of the previously mentioned Facebook groups. There were still taxes and cleaning fees, mostly because we had arranged to host Thanksgiving dinner for family, but there were no extra booking fees. All three houses were waterfront in desirable tourist areas, and I'm fairly sure all three counties have tourism tax. We spent 19 nights traveling for a cost of $10,426.56, or an average of $548.77 a night. For a little backstory, we purchased a Grand Design Transcend Explorer 24 BHX at the end of June 2025. We took delivery on July 3rd, and our first trip began July 18th. The RV purchase was supposed to be completely utility based. It was basically a tool or a means to an end. We wanted something better built, but simple and affordable. We knew it was going to be a tight fit for five people. Heck, the youngest kid basically sleeps in the space that's meant for storage under the bunks. And that sounds way worse than it is. I'll cover it in more detail in another video, but rest assured, he really enjoys the space we made for him. We weren't RV people. We really didn't understand the hype, but it was the most cost effective way to accomplish our goals. We needed a landing spot for the lake property. And wouldn't it be awesome if we could take it down to my in law's place in Florida when we visited them instead of paying for two rooms at a mid hotel located 20 minutes away? We took that first trip on July 18th and we were all in love with it when it ended on the 27th. The thought was that we needed to go down and see my husband's parents. We'd really backed off on travel the first part of 2025 because of the land purchase, and we were trying to be very frugal since we were trying to get that ball rolling. We had this new camper and it was summer break. Why not make the trip an adventure? Instead of staying at the state park that's very close to my in law's house, we decided to stay at a private RV park that's on the tail end of Jackson Blue Springs so I could paddleboard. I like that better than some of the other water in that area because since there's the spring, the water's colder and there's fewer alligators. Not none, but fewer. We spent 2 nights there. Then we went down to St. George Island and stayed at Dr. Julian G. Bruce, St. George Island, Florida State Park, and we stayed there for 4 nights. My middle kid needed to be in Birmingham for a doctor's appointment that Friday. A year membership to Thousand Trails was included with the purchase of our RV. The only location just happens to be on Smith Lake, about an hour away from his doctor. So we went from St. George Island to there and stayed there for a long weekend at zero cost. We were hooked, especially my youngest son. His birthday is in August after school starts, and he begged to go on another trip for his birthday. I found an awesome place less than 2 hours away, so we did a birthday weekend trip at Great Escapes in Leesburg, Alabama. After the Great Escapes trip, the kids were nonstop asking for more trips. Labor Day weekend was coming up, so we booked Wheeler Lake KOA. I got to paddleboard, and the boys got a ropes course. Everybody was happy. Fall break was a bucket list trip for me. I've never been to Rainbow Springs despite my mom living 10 minutes away. It was absolutely worth it, and we will definitely be going back. On the way down to Denellen, we stayed overnight at Three Rivers State Park and saw my in laws again. Three Rivers is now probably one of my favorite places. My middle son's birthday usually falls during fall break, and it did in 2025 as well. And he wanted to do a water park just like my youngest child did for his birthday. And since we'd heard a lot about Splash RV Resort in Milton, Florida, we went there next before we headed home. The boys even got to trick or treat there, even though it was the beginning of October. The boys wanted to go fishing, and we didn't have any Thanksgiving plans, so we booked the Joe Wheeler Alabama State Park last minute and did just that and spent Thanksgiving on the lake and freezing while we fished. Back in September, I had ordered some makeshift plushies for my youngest as a Christmas present. However, I was not thrilled that I paid nearly $30 in tariffs. Suddenly, Christmas was looking exceptionally expensive. After discussing everything with my husband, we sat the boys down and asked them if they would rather have a big Christmas with many gifts at home, or would they rather do a smaller Christmas with a couple gifts and have a big camping trip. They jumped at the trip idea. I suggested South Florida and the Keys, and they were all in. The difficulty was that we were rapidly approaching October, and December and January's peak season in Florida, and booking anything, especially in the Keys, is nearly impossible. Even my beloved Three Rivers State Park was very booked for the start of the trip, and we got the last spot for the way back. After an insane amount of research and a fair bit of luck, I snagged 7 nights at Jolly Roger RV Resort in Marathon over Christmas and 4 nights at Camp Margaritaville in Auburndale for New Year's Eve. It wasn't sold out when I booked, but it was at capacity while we were there. To elaborate, that's 90 cabins and 310 RV sites. Also, I managed to get a waterfront site at Fort DeSoto campground for 2 nights as a stopover between Three Rivers and Marathon on the way down, since we try not to do more than 350 miles in a day with the camper. I later learned that getting a dog friendly site, let alone a waterfront one, is next to impossible most of the time. Luck was definitely on our side. In total, we camped 42 nights and traveled nearly 4,600 miles in roughly 6 months. That brings us to a grand total of $3,704.26 spent on lodging. That's an average of 88.20 a night. In the last 6 months of 2024, we booked 19 nights at a cost of $10,426.56 at an average of $548.77 a night. That same 6 months in 2025, we traveled 42 nights at a cost of $3,704.26 at an average of $88.20 a night. That means we saved $6,722.30. That's an average of $460.57 a night. And we traveled an additional 23 days. If we had traveled the same 42 days in 2024 that we did in 2025 at $548 a night, the cost would have been over $23,000. Staying in vacation rentals would have cost at least 6 times more, probably more than that, because vacation rentals in the Keys tend to be extremely cost prohibitive. I don't know that that trip would have happened had we had to book hotels or vacation rentals. I'm not going to go into details about the specifics of it, but I will say it's not what we're actually paying. Our official RV payment is $225.60 a month. No matter how I crunch or even manipulate the numbers, this was not the worst purchase, especially when you consider all the non tangible benefits we've gotten from it. I mean, we spent Christmas Eve in the freaking Keys. I paddleboarded on Christmas Day. We spent New Year's Eve in Margaritaville, and now I have a free camper, sorta, using girl math. Phrase it like, honey, I saved us $19,000 by buying a $23,000 camper. Or maybe if I pitched it like, if you take into account how much we saved on travel, the camper only cost $3,600. Yeah, I don't think that flies either, but the math is the math. Now that we've covered how camping is still an affordable option, I'm going to cover a few other benefits and observations I've discovered while working on this. A big one is that we accidentally save money on food. When we stay at hotels and vacation rentals, even when we have a kitchen or kitchenette, we still usually eat at least one meal a day at a restaurant or similar, and sometimes it's twice a day. Unintentionally, we started making most of our meals at the campsite like we would do at home. It's just so much easier and it's definitely cheaper. As an added benefit, my husband really enjoys cooking on his griddle, so he makes many of our meals while camping. That's a big stress off of me. Buying groceries for a trip really isn't any different than buying groceries for home, so there's no extra hassle there. The bigger difference is travel days. We have always stopped and gotten fast food on our trips, and we try to continue this. And sometimes we still do get fast food, but we have found that it is so much easier to stop and have sandwiches or leftovers and eat at a picnic table at a rest stop. Honestly, eating at a table in the RV at a truck stop parking lot is better than trying to order food for five at a Wendy's. Not to mention that it's easier to deal with radar since we can take the time to walk in. Fast food for a family of five nowadays, most of the time is well over $50. It's just not worth it. And it usually makes me sick. Comparing places to stay in the Florida Panhandle. We stay at the Hampton Inn in Marianna, Florida, 20 to 30 minutes away from my in law's house when we visit them. They don't allow you to have a fifth person in a two-bedroom studio room. There's just not the space. They don't have a bigger room, so we have to get two rooms. The trip that I'm using for this math was March 9 through 11, 2024, and it cost $247.50 per room for 2 nights. That brings us to a total of $495. We did get a small discount because of where my husband works. On this trip, we left Marietta and traveled to Tallahassee to meet up with my dad. Like I said, we didn't have radar, but my dad had his dog, so we stayed at the Staybridge Suites. They're consistently solid, are dog friendly, and several days a week they have a light dinner buffet. This lets us get away with going out for a largest lunch, so we only have to pay for one meal out since we usually snack for breakfast. This location used to be amazing, but on this trip, it was really disappointing. Anyway, we got a one-bedroom suite that was plenty big for 3 nights and totaling $867.83. For comparison, on the October 2025 trip, we stayed at the Splash RV Resort. It's fairly upscale and has a small water park that includes a lazy river. It has hands down been the most expensive RV spot that we have stayed at to date. Second place for most expensive was Camp Margaritaville in Auburndale for New Year's Eve, and it was $92 a night cheaper. They also didn't nickel and dime us nearly as much. Anyway, we stayed at Splash for 3 nights as well for a total of $754.69. If you break these three visits down by nightly rate, the Staybridge was $290 a night. The Hampton Inn and Splash come in with about a dollar difference, so we'll say they both cost $250 a night. Keep in mind that Splash includes radar at that price. If we paid the pet fee at Hampton Inn, then it would have been $75 more, and I'm not sure if that's per night or just per visit. So, which would you rather have? A nondescript Hampton Inn next to the interstate or your own personal space in a very nice resort that has a lazy river and water slides, and the kids had activities to do that included trick or treating? The two pictures on the screen are from Splash, by the way. It's absolutely beautiful. My argument may not exactly hold up for this one, but the point is still valid. It really depends on your personal or your family's preferences. I'm going to compare a vacation rental that is listed on VRBO and an RV space that is listed on a lot adjoining someone's home. I'm going to assume you know what VRBO is, but if you don't already know, Hipcamp is basically the same thing, but it lists stays for a variety of camping styles. To keep things as fair as possible, both of these listings are located on the same street with the same water access and are 2 or 3 lots away from each other. They're very close. It's in Homosassa Springs, Florida, and I've used the same dates. All fees are included in these numbers. Let's start with the VRBO listing. This place is absolutely amazing. I've spoken to the owner several times and he is wonderful. Even though I'm using this listing as an example, I highly, highly, highly recommend staying at this location and would stay here in a heartbeat if the price was in our budget. This place lives rent free in my head, and I think of it often. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. The Backyard Manatee Club is a waterfront, 1,600 square foot house that has 4 bedrooms and sleeps nine. And actually sleeps nine. Not like an RV where they include converting the dining table to a bed as a sleeping space. It also has 2 bathrooms. You get a discount if you book a whole week, so I chose that. I chose October 4th through 11, 2026, and the cost would be $4,314 or about $616 a night. Spendy, but probably well worth it, honestly. In contrast, there's a Hip Camp that's an RV space a few houses down. It is private, but the owners live in the house adjacent, which could be good or bad. I will say that I'm in a Florida Springs Facebook group with the owner, and she seems sane, if not even delightful to deal with. I've never spoken to her directly, though. The lot also has access to the same water for kayaking, paddleboarding, and swimming. There are frequently manatees as well. The site provides water and electrical hookups, but no sewer, so you'd have to locate a dump site nearby. Those are fairly common in Florida, so that's not a huge negative. The biggest downside that I can tell is that the road to it is extremely narrow, so that may be an issue if you're not confident in your parking and navigating abilities. You can get the same dates as the Backyard Manatee Club for a total of $553.48 or about $79 a night. If you're going by price alone, it's a clear winner. You're on the same street with access to the same water. However, I can easily make the case that the amenities are nowhere near the same. So it really would come down to your family's preferences. Personally, the cost of renting the house is absolutely prohibitive. Having the Hipcamp location actually makes this area accessible for us. And since I'm a touch germ phobic, I would absolutely be more comfortable in my own space. But much like the large space between prices, there is a massive space difference between an RV and a four-bedroom house. To be clear, 99% of the time, I don't find that the space difference between a our camper and a vacation rental material enough to justify the cost. Because if I didn't feel that way, it would make my entire argument invalid. That being said, I'll stick the links to both places down below if you want to check them out. Out of all of us, I think Radar loves the camper the most. If you say the word adventure to him, he goes to the camper. He's always enjoyed traveling with us, but we're fairly convinced that he thinks the RV is his and he's just nice enough to let us sleep there. We took the camper in for service in October between trips, and he was 100% sulking when we came home without it. And he did his best to keep us from leaving the house without him when we left to drop it off. He was so excited when we brought it back home a couple of weeks later. He actually gets mopey and dramatic when we start packing up a site to move to the next one, and especially when we pack up to head home. I don't know what we do differently that tips him off, but we call it Dickens mode because he will do things like lay next to a blanket instead of on the blanket. But my personal favorite was when he found a good sized rock to use as a pillow. So much drama. But it is nice to have him with us. We don't have to pawn him off on our relatives or hire a dog sitter. He gets to have all the adventures. He did so many things on this last trip and he met so many nice people and he loves the attention. He actually responds to, "Oh my God, it's a corgi." Even though Radar enjoys the camper more than we do, I do need to mention that cumulatively, the purchase has had a big effect on our family. Like I said before, the boys chose to take a big camping trip over the winter break. There's something special here, and I'm not exactly sure what it is or how to quantify it. Sure, the boys have always loved our trips, but the RV ones just hit different. I thought it was just me thinking this or that I was being extra. However, I've had several people on a few trips now mention how happy the boys seem, even when they're doing mundane things. Sure, our friends and family have said it, but now we're getting it from strangers and other campers. It hasn't happened yet, but I've been told that eventually we'll meet new people and start to build a community. I'm not completely convinced that it'll happen anytime soon, but I will welcome it if or when it happens. So, yeah, we've saved a significant amount of money in 2025, but we've also got so much more out of it as well. In conclusion, I think people are valid when they say that camping costs have increased significantly. However, so has everything else. Camping is still relatively a cost effective way to travel. As far as my family is concerned, it has saved us a lot of money and pretty much offsets the expense of the camper. We'd definitely like to continue traveling whenever we get the chance, and that's definitely good for content. I'm also still working on the multi part series telling the story of the lake property, and I'm still going through the footage from the winter break trip. So, if you're interested in joining me on the journey, like and subscribe. Until the next one.